Okay, let's regroup a minute. Let me show you two more examples, and then we can just as these are slightly different types of studies. And these were multi-site, so much more complicated, and a lot of other people involved in writing them, so definitely did not follow sort of my format. One of the first things you can see is that, now this was a grant that was scored, but it hasn't gotten funded, and this is the one that the reviewer said we didn't publish enough, so this was a renewal of an R01 that had been funded by NHLBI. But as you can see here, that the format, so for example, that doesn't have the B, that was just a decision that they made. They're not following the same formatting. This one, they decided to just put the statement. So here, obesity, metabolic disorders, and Latino youth. Pretty simple, nice inclusion of a figure that was based on published data, but makes a compelling case for why we need to study this issue. And then one of the things that this person who was leading on it did is just have a summary statement after each section. So just to remind the reviewer, this is why this is important. Okay. Talked about national prevalence, described this as a public health crisis, particularly in boys, and then goes into the rest of the issues. Another key aspect of our proposal was the fact that we were looking at parent and caregiver and home environmental factors, and so really presenting the evidence here of what we know about how they're related to each other. And then going in deep further in terms of other attributes that have been studied, general parenting among them. And then again, here's a nice summary statement. So in summary, the available research suggests that parents and the health environment are important factors, may represent modifiable targets for future interventions. That was, throughout our proposal, we're talking about how we need this now longitudinal study, because it was a cross-sectional study. Now we need to look at these relationships longitudinally, so then we can do the intervention. Yet even the most recent systematic reviews have identified longitudinal evidence as scarce, so we're saying we need this because we don't want to base interventions purely on cross-sectional studies, and we need this critical direction. It's a critical direction for future research. Comprehensive prospective models are needed to elucidate the risks and protective factors of specific parenting attributes on youth behavior, obesity risk, particularly underserved Latinos, or underserved, not limited to Latinos. It will address this gap, examining simultaneously the associated parents' health behaviors, their parenting practices, social support, and the influence of the home environment. So really encapsulated that whole thing and said, this is what we would be delivering. And then the next thing was peer influence. So we have peer influence, talk about what we know. And I don't know if she didn't do a summary statement on there. But there is a little bit here at the end. So we will look at peer socialization, cultural incorporation of obesity. So really talking about sort of that sociocultural factors and why they're important to study. Now, let's go to the actual review, and let's just look really quickly at the scores for significance. So gave it a 3. The first reviewer gave it a 3 out of 9, with 1 being the highest, best score. Not bad, not great. What kind of comments did this person make in terms of significance? So they saw this significance in terms of addressing health risk. It's really not addressing health risk, it's studying it. Potentials for interventions. You can always see they're more interested in the intervention, so if this is leading there, that's great. Complex relationships, paucity of longitudinal studies could provide some useful information. Here's where there were some concerns. So several programs currently exist to address youth behavior, and the potential value of findings is likely small. So we didn't make a good enough case as how is this really contributing to that overall body of research? Hey, Sarah. Let me grab you. Oh, you're welcome. Cute dress.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. It is well known that the home environment has a strong influence on child health behavior. How will this be disentangled from genetic influence? We address nothing related to genetics in this study, but it came up because it is an important influence, right? Especially when you're talking about parents. What we're doing now is we're looking at some significance and innovation sections from a previous study and seeing what reviewer comments were about it for this proposal. Okay, let's go to the next reviewer. Next reviewer rated it a 2. That's almost perfect, which is great. What did they say? Addresses important public health issue. Looks at parental home peer influences on obesity and metabolic syndrome. They're saying data already exists. So maybe they know of longitudinal studies that we're not familiar with, but we pretty much did we scoured the field. Because there's a lot in ad health, as an example, around youth, but not necessarily looking at these associations. And they didn't always collect data from both respondents, both the parent and the kid. Often it's parent proxy or child proxy. Here's another one. So genetics, I can guarantee that probably what happened is somebody brought it up in the review panel, and so everybody had to then include it as part of their response. I can't imagine everybody would have thought of it necessarily from the get-go. But overall, pretty good. And the comments are very consistent with the score, too, so that makes perfect sense. Okay. Then the last one. Here's another 3. So what were the concerns with this person? Focus on adolescent Hispanics, obesity, metabolic syndrome, great. Adolescence an important period, that was something we addressed. Failure to consider poor or insufficient sleep as a modifier of proposed associations. I thought we had it in there, so it's maybe something that they might have overlooked. But we did have sleep as part of one of the behaviors that we were looking at, so no idea. This reviewer's comments, and we're going to talk more about this after you actually do a review, the next session, are not consistent with the scoring. So this is where you get frustrated as somebody who receives a critique, because if you get 3, then there really should be more weaknesses, and for some reason they just didn't bother to write them down.
So when you get something like that, and you know that you've included sleep in the proposal as a whole, and you get a comment like that from a reviewer, do you then decide to incorporate it more explicitly in the language of the aims, or do you not necessarily do that?
Not necessarily. So let me give you an example of an even more, and not so much in this. I've had reviewers tell me there's no power calculation. And yet another reviewer will say, great power calculation for the same proposal. So they just missed it. You know, maybe when they were maybe they were printing it out and they lost a page or who knows what. So I don't. It depends on what the issue is. So if it's something like that, I'll just be very polite and say, power calculation can be found on this page. That's all you need to say. With this, we would have to probably go back to the science. What's the science tell us about the importance of sleep in this whole theoretical model that we're testing? And then decide whether or not to more explicitly put it in there. I know we have it as an outcome because it was one of the things we're measuring, not only self-report, but objectively with the new accelerometers that allow you to do that. But, you know, maybe we didn't specify it as well enough as we could have in, say, the evaluation section, right? And so, or maybe we didn't address it. I don't think we addressed it at all in the significance section. So maybe I would add a few statements in there about that, because I don't want to ignore the comment. You never want to ignore a comment. But how much you elaborate will depend on space and everything
Like
else.
how she said, a considerable weakness. So that's, I mean, in this reviewer's mind, that and that alone took you to a 3.
Yep.
No.
Yep, exactly. Let me see, I think there might be a 4th reviewer, which is unusual. No, that's it. Okay. So that's the significance. Let me go. That proposal.
And that's the one that didn't get funded as a continuation because
We
You
didn't
didn't
have
publish
enough,
enough?
we didn't have enough papers,
Oh.
yeah. So, it's part of
So
the
there's
renewal.
no recourse to
It'll
that.
part of renewal, huh?
So there's no recourse.
No, you just gotta keep working. Yeah. I'm curious, because I know that Katrina, a colleague of Antoinette and Sarah, submitted a renewal on her R01, and had she gotten feedback yet? No. Okay. So soon, she'll know. Okay, so let's look at, so one of the things that we were talking about, Sarah, is, the format of the significance and innovation section, and so everybody was tasked with thinking about how theirs could be. But the format is also really critical because here we see statements, whereas in other proposals, we might use questions. So you see here in this significance section, why target the prevention, so many different ways that you could format it, sort of how you want to present it. When you use the question format, we all, I think, sort of agreed that it was nice in B3 that the questions were answered with underlines, so you sort of knew, okay, here's the question and here's the answer. So, okay. So let's go back to that Soul Youth proposal and let's look at innovation, so how they address that. So here, use different format. I probably, if this were mine, I would not have done that. I would have used something more similar. And again, it's just, how your eye and what fatigues you. For things that fatigue me are inconsistencies in formatting. It's just personal. So I just try and make things as consistent as possible. Anything to make it sort of flow. Because why use numbers above and then this formatting doesn't make sense. But anyway. Okay. So here the innovation they said was, the fact that we were focusing on Latino youth. I'm not sure that that's necessarily so innovative. So we'll see what the reviewers say. An innovative sample, yeah, maybe, I would say, in part because this is the first study in which we're getting different Latino subgroups, so there's a lot of research that looks at this Mexican population or the Puerto Rican or Dominican, but this one actually has everybody. So in that sense, this is a very innovative study where you can study these processes in multiple subgroups. We could have probably done a lot more in this area and really illustrating how the field is lacking this type of research when you're looking at these, trying to design these models. Longitudinal design, we found that there isn't a whole lot of studies that are looking at longitudinally, but there are some, and again, we probably could have done a better job of cataloging those. Assessments of peer influences, this is actually something that is innovative from this perspective because we weren't able to find a lot of studies. I wanted to add a component around siblings because that's really understudied, but we all felt it was beyond the scope of what we could do. But I think we probably could have done a better job with that. And then the multi-method approach, because we were planning to use a lot of different methodologies, including, I can't remember if it ended up in this proposal or another one, but we even at one point had some GIS layering on there and just seeing how the external environment also influences. So, given that,
Question now. So
yeah,
I heard you use the phrase a couple times. Not a lot of people have studied. So for innovation, and maybe this is just being too sensitive, but it seemed I've been held back by the idea if anybody else even considered it, even one person, then it's not innovative anymore.
That's a really strict criteria. I wouldn't use that because then I'd be stymied. Like, I don't know what I would do.
So I just, because I have been that strict with myself, like beating myself up over,
Where I would have a problem would be if, and reviewers have definitely knocked this, is if something hasn't been tested in a specific population, whether it's Latino or some others, That in and of itself does not make it innovative. Because unless you make a really strong case that the generalizability of previous study findings are in no way relevant, then maybe it's innovative. But that would be a hard case to make, I think, unless somebody has a good example.
But that piece would still be highlighted as one component of
Yes.
innovation.
You could, but I would not put it the first one.
Okay.
Definitely not, no. You'd have to make a case for why, what are you anticipating for it to be different? Okay, so here what they said was innovative, the focus on understudied low-income populations, the link. So that first one actually is not really related to innovation. And if I was the scientific review officer, not that they go to this level of detail, but if they did, to me that's more of a significance issue, right? Because this is an important population to study. Is it necessarily make it innovative? Not necessarily. But the second part of that, the ability to link youth data with parent data, that is innovative. There are not a lot of studies that have done that. I think there might be some in Minnesota from the colleagues that you probably work with, Nicole, where that might have been done, because I know some of their adolescent trials or studies and trials have done this. Project E is one of them, right? Yeah. But they say the methods are not very innovative. Yeah, no, probably not. I mean, we're using standard methods to assess health risks, you know, different biometry and blood and everything else, and self-report, 24-hour recalls, accelerometers. So no, there is not much innovation there. Okay, let's look at that. So that was, oh, let's see, we forgot to look at the score. So their score was 5. That is a killer. So that is something that actually I've digested these, but not fully, or it's been a while since we just shelved it so we could work on papers. But that's something we really need to address. So maybe, and actually we've been talking a little bit about it. We talked a little bit about it in the beginning, the whole, and I'm not familiar with this field, but the microbiome, you know, something having to do with, do you guys know what I'm talking about? Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Okay, well it has something to do with the gut or something, and how that impacts risk for obesity.
Oh,
So it would have been better for us to put something in there. Another thing that came up was, you know, should we have a genetic component to this and really tease out genetics versus the environment, or
somebody on that review committee is into.
somebody is into it, yes, exactly. Probably studying that review committee would be a good idea. But that is bad. 5 that's not going anywhere. Even if we didn't have the problem with the publications, this proposal would never get funded with that score. The unfortunate thing is this reviewer didn't give us a whole lot to work with. Because to say that it's not, it didn't tell you that much.
So,
but they're not obligated to either. They just...
And did this get, so this got scored?
This got scored, it did not get funded.
Okay.
So this is the one I mentioned before where they said we didn't have enough papers.
Right.
It was a renewal. Yeah. But it's competitive renewal, so it goes under review just like any other. Okay, so let's look at the next person. Here, innovation is 3, so a little bit better than 5. Examination of parent, how much peer influence, so like that, like the study population, that was innovative, not even telling us that much. The longitudinal approach, that's consistent with what we know.
They almost kind of went through your bullet points and listed your bullet points there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they do that,
Yeah.
absolutely. So you want to guide them where you want them to go, for sure, for your good review. That's it, standard measures. So obviously we should have had some innovation in terms of how we were looking at this. Or maybe it was our statistical analysis section that could have been improved, I don't know. Here's another one that's a 3. So again, having 3s are good. Obviously if it was 1 or 2 would be fantastic. But let's see the comments. So they like the focus on Latino youth. Again, to me that's not innovative, that would be more of a significance issue. Studying associations of parent-family. Again, I'm not sure if that's innovative, but the linking is definitely innovative. Identifying risks and protective factors. Again, to me, that's not an innovation, that's a significance issue. Role of social networks and understanding. So here, this is somewhat innovative. So this is definitely an innovation criteria in that, you know, these methods have been used, and everybody probably, if you're read the New York Times years ago, would be familiar with Fowler's article from San Diego, from UC San Diego, where it was talking about social networks and who you affiliate with. And so it's not innovative in the sense that, yes, people have studied this now, and if you look at the literature, there's been a lot more written on it, but not necessarily in this context with the family, you know, parent and child data linking, with the peer influence. So there's where you start to get innovative. You're sort of pushing the field in terms of understanding some more of the social influence. But here again, so this, it probably, I can't imagine that each of these reviewers would have said this independently, so it's quite possible that they revised their critique after the review itself, and maybe all added that comment on there.
But the population's unique, so this person wanted to give you.
Yeah, yeah. What was their overall score? Let's
3.
see.
Oh,
The
yeah.
overall score for the proposal. They just have it overall. They don't, I don't think they have the whole impact score for each one. They just give your overall impact score. Okay, so that gives you another example. Let me see. Here was another. Okay, so here was a proposal that was just funded. This is an R01, and this was, let me just show you the full thing because it gives you a better sense. So this was a proposal that was submitted by my colleague in University of Washington, Brian Salins, if you know him, is a great guy. And so he submitted this proposal originally, and it was about a parenting intervention, but it was training parents to become the intervention agents. So the idea is, how can we develop a more sustainable model that would sort of just continue into the future if you work with an organization, train parents to around obesity prevention, healthy eating, physical activity, but then use those trained parents to then deliver the intervention in the future. So we got a good score in the beginning, but there were some weaknesses. Among them were some issues that I was able to address, so he added me on there, which I was grateful for. So I like working with him. You can see now, this is a one-page, and we'll talk about this more in a few weeks, but this is the introduction to revised applications. So this is the one page that you have to respond to the, 20 or 15 or 20 pages of critiques. So here is a nice way of doing it. This was one of the critiques from reviewer 1, and he mixed it in with comments related to recruitment from reviewer 2, and then addressed this all here. Really nice comprehensive response. Here is talking about the training of interventionists, and so both reviewers mentioned that. Recruitment and replacement characteristics of peers, that was reviewer 1. You see how he's using these sections and being very explicit about where to go to get more information, but in a very consolidated way, right? Which makes it so much easier when you only have one page to respond to.
And when you refer to that section, how do you indicate in that section change? Do you highlight?
They have very specific instructions about how you do that. They give you a couple of different options, which relates to not overusing formatting in your initial proposal, because then it's hard to see. But what most people are doing now is they will put brackets around new content. So I'll show you that in a minute in his revised proposal. I think I have it in the revised proposal. Yeah, we have it in there. So that's one way. Other people use italics. So NIH gives you some guidelines about what to do. You can see. Now, as a reviewer, it doesn't really matter. I tend to read, and most people just read the whole thing over again, unless you feel really comfortable that you remember this proposal. But it's like, months ago, and you might have read other proposals in the intervening time, so but it's there to help people. So here's a good example. So here's analytic plan. You know, reviewers 1, 2, and 3 all have the same comments. So this is a good way if we were addressing the genetic issue, we would say, you know, collection of genetic data, reviewer 1 and 2, or 1 and 3, I can't remember who brought it up, but not all of them. So you don't have to respond to each reviewer individually, obviously, is my point. Okay, so that's that. Now let's move to the proposal, and let's see how here. This is what I would recommend because it makes it so much easier. So this is the same Introduction to Revised Application. This is Deanna Castro's R21 to do eye tracking.